Welcome to the podcast, everyone. I am Adam White, Senior Director of Technical Marketing. I have with me Chaz Clausen and Seth Williams, our esteemed field CTOs here at Sumo Logic. Hello, friends.
Hey, Adam.
Hey,
Hope y'all are doing well today.
You too, buddy.
Yeah, great. This is going to be a fun topic. We are talking about AI in the SOC, enhancing human expertise with intelligent automation. First off, I like the enhancing human expertise. I think that's going to be a good theme to kind of talk through here. But Seth, there was basically it would probably be good to level set a bit on, how SOCs got here, evolution of the SOC, from like SIM rule fatigue to modern SecOps, some of the challenges. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of unpacking that a little bit, and then we can probably chat around that topic.
Yeah, for sure. So, security operations. I mean, everybody grew up a little bit differently in security operations at the beginning, right? We were all the defenders of the world. Were all trying to do the best they could with what they had. So, this meant initially, let's review some logs to see if things were going on that we didn't know were going on. And then it evolved into building in solutions like Sumo, Logic, and others to where we can bring all this log data together. So throughout the course of security operations history, what we've tried to do is to continually gain more visibility and then apply logic to that data, to that visibility, to then give us insights into what might be anomalous or might be nefarious within an organization or an operation. Throughout that journey, we got better and better tools, right? So we talked about Sumo, bringing logs together, bringing some metrics into the scene to see if systems or applications were, spiking here and there, and we got great visibility. Well, what came with that was an unintended consequence, which was we have a lot of data now, right? So how do we sift through all this data with our eyeballs and our brains to effectively see the bad things over top of the normal things or the non-bad things?
Like we got what we asked for,
We
but
do.
that was also a lot for humans to wade through and make sense of.
It's exactly right, right? It says the law of unintended consequences is
Yeah.
what we asked for. And this unfortunately was what led to, later years, probably about 5 to 10 years ago, where, SIM is dead type of conversation, where folks were like, SIM hasn't delivered. It hasn't given me what I need to protect. I think it's a bit of a short-sighted comment, but also rooted in a bit of truth in that we were inundated with data. SOC analysts and investigators were just constantly sifting through things and they could never catch up. And there was always the next alert. And we were having to put in a process to, take this new list of alerts that was distilled down from raw logs and raw events to this smaller list, but still very large list of things to go and investigate. So the goal has always been to get to the bad things faster and to ensure, A, that we're protecting the organization, protecting our customers' information, protecting our crown jewels. And we had a tough time delivering on that just because of the expansion of technology. And it's not gotten any better, right? There's still digital exhaust from all sorts of systems today, and they've just grown bigger in their log size. So our goals still remain the same to protect the environment as efficiently as we possibly can so that we can mitigate the risk to our organization. And uh, tools have done a good job of that. I will say that we have gotten a ton better in the last several years about distilling this information down into something that's actionable for our defenders to go in and actually do a thing. What our conversation about is today is going to be another tool set, and I'm going to drill down on that. It's a tool set built on newer technology that is going to allow our defenders to be even better at their job. So essentially, we've gotten here via a large volume of an altruistic goal to protect good people's data. There's way too much of that data. We built some tools to help us with that. It still was way too much data. We built some tools more recently that's gotten us pretty close, and we've introduced automation to help with dealing with that data. And now we're moving into an era where we have this new tool set, artificial intelligence, that will help us hopefully get even further in the effort to protect systems quicker and more efficiently. So hope
Yeah.
there's a lot of words, but hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a great summarization. And as Seth was talking, it reminded me, and I'm going to share a screenshot of it, but it reminded me of a Google research paper that they published last year, and it was basically around how AI can reverse the defender's dilemma. And I think it's worth just showing this as we start the conversation. But traditionally, like defense hasn't changed. We're just there's a there's an attack surface, and the adversaries are trying to get in and cause negative impact to our businesses, and we have to defend that. So then how does AI change the game? Well, in a lot of ways it doesn't, but in a lot of ways it does. And I think that traditional, like, perimeter moat mentality is gone, where it's not just a single way in, but it's really once they're in, we have multiple layers of defense, right? And
Yeah.
this slide here is not, I'm not crediting Google with this because I took their slide and kind of hacked it a little bit, but all of the technologies that we're used to seeing, endpoint protection, NTA, UBA, full stack log analytics, all of those tools that have been around are now being infused with AI, right?
Mhm.
So that whether or not you want AI in the SOC or not, or you think it should be, the reality is it's here already. Every vendor that you're currently deploying or that's currently in your stack, I guarantee is talking about AI, how AI can improve their detection and their response and their, whatever. Um, the next iteration of this, like now, how do we move this into an agentic framework where you have multiple agents that are almost autonomous, that are leveraging all of these different tools across these different layers? And that's really where it gets interesting. And that's where we're seeing it evolve, where you will have AI deployed as point solutions, but then you'll also have an overarching AI strategy as an organization that can glue all of this different streams of telemetry together and actually act on your behalf and really level up your whole team. So it's going to be a wild ride. I mean, I would say this is the year of the explosion of AI SOC solutions. And if you're one of those that have the privilege of walking the floors of all the different conferences, and you can throw a rock and hit probably 3 or 4 different AI SOC solutions. And whether that's a bubble or here to stay or how they're going to be platformized, I think is still up for debate. But regardless, I think the market is responding to a need. And the need is we have to be more intelligent with our defense, with our detections, and we have to do more with the technology that's available to us. And that's
Yeah.
really, like Seth said, that's what we're talking about today. Like
The only
what's
thing I'm
tangibly useful. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to disagree with you on is the I don't think defense in depth goes away, right? I think the moats, the moat. I think we just have multiple moats now, and it
Yeah.
almost segues very nicely into agentic kind of framework and kind of framing the conversation around what agents can do for people, and we'll dive into that here in a little bit. But what agents can actually do for people is now that we have these many different moats that we need to protect, these crown jewels in many different places because of the way technology has evolved to the perimeter is no longer a static circle or square, whatever shape you want to choose. But we now have to protect these things individually. Agents do very similar. It's a similar approach. They do different things at different times, right? And they typically have a defined objective, right? So not only defenders through your diagram, Chaz, there, all of these defenders, they only have to succeed once, right? So we're protecting. You said at the beginning, defense hasn't changed all that much foundationally. We're still ensuring that we have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's what we're striving for. But now moving into this world of AI in security operations, protecting those many different moats because of how architectures exist nowadays, we hope to combat that with agentic technology.
Yeah. Some of this harkens back to our last conversation as well, where we were talking about attackers using AI, and so the defense side of it, needs to be using AI in meaningful ways in order to you know to help with that defender's dilemma. Yeah, I love that diagram too. I like the way you kind of flipped it too there, Chaz. That was nice. Seth, you were saying something, that AI is a tool set, and I like that because it brings to mind like who uses tools. Humans use tools, so humans are going to be the ones using these AI tools to their advantage. And AI is really not, human versus AI. It's human plus AI, and needing that human in the mix, that we need that intuition of people and their experience to really make the most out of these outputs that AI is giving us, which are again incredibly important just because of the volume of data and the volume of things that we're trying to keep track of. But you still need people in the mix to actually do something with that and make, intelligent decisions. Agentic aside, and we'll get to that and how some of that, kind of augments that loop. But yeah, talk about that a little bit, if you will, just kind of that, the human points of AI in the SOC and where that's kind of most meaningful and most critical.
Yeah, yeah. So I describe it that way to be very specific,
Yeah.
because that's, you said it, right? Humans use tools. That's what separates us from the animals, well, some animals at least. We use tools very well, and I describe artificial intelligence as a tool set, hopefully to put the minds of those individuals to which use these tools, or fear that these tools might take their place, that it's just another arrow in the quiver.
Mhm.
It's a tool. It's a tool. I profess to be a very amateur woodworker, and I have a lot of tools to use, and the right tool for the job makes all the difference in the world. If I want to go dig a ditch with just a spade shovel, it's going to take me a long time. But if I get the right tool, I can do that much, much quicker and much more efficiently. Artificial intelligence for the defender and for many other occupations out there is the right tool for the job if used appropriately. So, what I would ultimately say to folks who are using artificial intelligence, or in the SOC specifically, is that never consider this tool to be a replacement. I know that it feels like that sometimes. Marketing tells you that sometimes, like we're here to, take away triage, we're here to do that. It's all to make you more efficient so that you have the context as a human to make the known decision, or contextual decision that's right for your organization. So, human in this loop or using these tools will, in my opinion, be around forever. We may get to the point where we have AI tooling dialed in so well that it's doing a lot of things autonomously, which is the one of the hallmarks of an agent. But I don't think that we'll ever come to a period where we don't have some human being in the middle, either saying this was a good decision or this was a bad decision,
Yeah.
or training a specific model to do something that is specific for an organization. All organizations, whether we like to believe it or not, have some differences and they want to treat things differently. So I don't feel that AI tooling is something that we should be fearful of, that we should not necessarily embrace. We should be skeptical, certainly, but we should understand that it's something to be used, not that's going to take our jobs or take us over. So there will always be
Yeah.
human in the loop.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that that I kind of stress similar to Seth is AI is very, very good at context building, and that is creating or pulling together information from disparate data sources and presenting it to the human analyst. And in times past, the analyst had to do that. They had to manually write queries, manually, comb through mountains of data in order to understand the kill chain or the attack life cycle or whatever the context is around a specific alert that they're dealing with in front of them. The great thing about AI is it can do that very, very well. And the reason is it was designed to chew through text, and textual data is how we're collecting this telemetry in the form of logs, right? And so now you've just enabled that analyst to skip all of the white knuckle, I'm going to write 10 queries today and write this big report, whereas AI can do a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of it, present it to the analyst for validation, right? And that's what AI can do very, very well. And I was, sharing with Seth, the my grandmother had this game in her attic. It was a fun attic. She had lots of stuff, but it was called pachinko. And I don't know if you guys know what pachinko is. Do you know what that is, Adam?
I feel
Okay.
like I've played it before. It's been a long time.
It's I don't even know how I'm trying to remember exactly where's the gamification in it, but you're dropping these little balls, steelies down, and they're kind of bouncing their way down through all of these different things, and then they land at the bottom. And if we were to take that and kind of layer into like how does that relate to a SOC, there are so many different data points that you have to investigate, right? And as an analyst, you're almost following the breadcrumbs, right? From different data points to different, evidence, et cetera. There's a lot, right? And to try and back your way out of it, it takes a lot of time and a lot of, effort to do that. Where if you layer AI on top of an investigation, it will immediately see the path that the ball took as it fell down and summarize that for you in a nice, beautiful package and say, hey, analyst, here is what happened, and here's the evidence that brought me to this conclusion. And now the analyst can take it from there. That's the beauty of AI, in my opinion. Before, we were trying to do that through deterministic logic. Like, I'm going to write 100 different rules that will cover all 100 different use cases. So that if the ball bounces here, then it's going to hit this rule. But if it bounces 3 ways over there, it'll be covered by this rule, and it was just almost unsolvable.
A
Now
bunch
we
of
could
if
use
thens that
actual,
are completely
yeah,
static
yeah, the if
and
then,
yeah,
right, way too brittle, way too rigid. Now in LLM, you can just say, hey, use your thought reasoning, chain of thought, whatever technology is best suited for it, and work your way through it, right? This massive data set. And that's now that burden has been lifted off the analyst. And that's what gets me most excited about is we're not trying to do this like write a rule for every condition and scenario under the sun and manage those rules by the way and tune those rules by the way. Instead, we're like, hey, AI can actually do it because it's all there. The data's there in text, which is all it needs, right?
yeah. It's so funny you said that about pachinko, actually, Chas, because before you said it, I was thinking of that game Plinko from from Price is Right.
Right.
Remember? It was very, very similar because it
Similar.
was kind of like AI is like, all right, it's going down to this bucket, so that means these things, you know. Yeah, it's funny we had similar thoughts there.
It's
Seth,
a,
I'm sorry, I
certainly a
feel
good
like I
visual.
cut you off.
It's certainly a good visualization on the different
Yeah,
routes, right? On the
yeah,
different routes that could take, and that's what Chaz is, I think, alluding to is the fact that with AI, I mean, we as humans, we take the path of least resistance most times, right? Um, and what that does is it builds those well-worn paths, builds those ruts, and good or bad or otherwise. Folks do what they know, right? So if I feel more comfortable doing this procedure to investigate an incident, then I might get stuck into that rut that says this is how I would do it. Well, artificial intelligence as a result of its capability can provide you a wider aperture to say, let's consider these things, but I'm going to consider it for you and then present the human, once again, the result of this tool that said, all right, I've investigated these things, all of which I now give to you as a result. And the human might not have been able to do that in an efficient way, in a timely fashion. So I think the pachinko game, hey, super fun, by the way. I love that game.
Yeah.
But I think that that illustrates the many different paths that AI can actually provide to the analyst to say, here are all the things that I've considered quickly.
Yeah. And I think just to kind of round that conversation off, I think that right now we're trying to balance because there's definitely value in having deterministic or predictable outcomes, especially when the attack vector can be, easily identified. And so that's a great use case for a rule. But there's also a lot of value, as Seth described, is like open the aperture up and find the unknowns, right? And let AI really come to the table with some unique thoughts. And where we land, I think, will be a combination of both. But like just maybe I always like taking it out of the theoretical because, there's value in like actually talking about real real detections. But like phishing is a great example. When you get a phishing alert as an analyst, a lot of it's like gut check, like, okay, read the email, what does it look like? And then maybe you have this SOP, which is great to have. But if you turn that over to AI, it will analyze the email word by word and it can give it a risk score and it can determine like what is the likelihood of this being, a spearfish or just a fish. And then it can analyze every URL and where those URLs go and automatically open them up. And then it can determine, like things, how targeted was it? How many other users got this email in my organization? And all of that would normally take a lot of time that a human could certainly do. But an AI system that's designed, and we're going to be talking more about agentic agents, but let's say you had an agent specifically targeting email analysis, and it's very, very good at doing that one thing. Now, all of a sudden, it can just quickly say, we believe this is a phishing attack. Here's our hypothesis and why we got there, right? And then the analyst can take it from there. So just, bringing it into like a real world scenario, that's how it's kind of evolving in the industry, I think.
Yeah. Speaking of agentic, it's a good time to shift to that. Actually, I mean, agents will start doing some more specific jobs in the SOC. How do you all kind of see that playing out? What are some of the first kind of low-hanging fruit items, from a like SOC helpfulness perspective? Like, let's assume that we start out at things that are going to have the greatest impact on the humans, right? What are, some of those more difficult problems? Where would agents kind of naturally add value? And how do you kind of see it building from those foundational agents to, maybe things that are more complex?
So I want to start this conversation, and I think it's a good topic to say, all right, what's the most practical thing that we can do with agents? But I want to start it because I believe wholeheartedly that words matter and the definition behind those words is
What
important.
is agentic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is an agent, right? So an agent is something that can perceive its own environment, right? It's one of the hallmarks of
Yeah.
an agent. Autonomy is another element of an agent. Saying I can go and do things without necessarily asking for permission to do a thing, right? This is typically built within the agent's actions. Whoever designed the agent says that I'm going to provide this capability, tooling to this agent. It can make decisions on its own. And there are a couple of different types of agents. There are reactive agents, right? I've seen a thing that triggers the agent to go and execute on those autonomous actions. There are deliberative agents that say, I am going to do this specific thing because of that specific thing. There are learning agents that will uh, provide more information or gather more information for itself, and then hopefully provide that as an output to the user. And then there is a multi-agent strategy that where you combine all of these different types together to ultimately provide a solution to the end user of any given tool that takes into consideration. Sometimes agents can even compete, right, with one another. So defining an agent is critical to what we're going to be talking about. now, which is autonomous action driven by machine learning, reasoning, and rule-based logic. And that last one is extremely important because Chaz kind of alluded to it before, is that there is value in the things we have done up until this point. The rule-based logic, identifying and tagging information as it's related to a given tactic or technique from MITRE's attack framework. That information and those detection rules that assign that information is extremely valuable for that model to then understand context around its job to go and provide the user additional information. So agents are a specific thing that act autonomously and have a tool set, and then they can sometimes communicate with one another. So sorry to may have you rephrase your question, Adam, but I wanted to make sure that we define what an agent is versus before we got into the
Oh
conversation.
no, that's great. That's great. Chaz, were you going to say something?
Well, no, I was just gonna say, Seth brought up like the metadata and tagging of like MITRE attack and MITRE defend. What's really, and this gets a little bit theoretical again, but what's so interesting about this is a lot of these mental models and knowledge graphs and systems of tagging, adversarial behavior, they were only moderately useful. Like operationalizing MITRE attack, for example, was never easy. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, I can tag the rules and then I can use, the analyst can determine like from, reconnaissance to data exfiltration and what happened in between there. But because we as defenders put all of this work into this, now we can layer on AI intelligence that can leverage that. It's almost like we were building towards a future we didn't even realize. And so now artificial intelligence can go in and actually understand adversarial behavior and actually have labels to apply. Um, and it's all because we've done this front lifting, right? Collecting the data, tagging the data, having, these frameworks that we can operate in. And so really we're in a very, very good place as defenders, I feel, because of all of that like prerequisite work that we did. And to Seth's point, we can purpose build these agents now that can autonomously do things built on the foundational knowledge of what we've been doing as defenders for decades.
Because
Yeah.
words matter. Because words, definitions, and standardizations matter. I mean,
Yeah.
if you go and ask anybody at an organization that's building tools with artificial intelligence, they'll tell you that the standardization of data to train a model to do something specific, a model that could be the bedrock for an agent, ask them about how much easier it would be to provide a data set with a standard, how much easier that is to then develop and make actionable into their application. I mean, while AI is great at crunching through text and predictive text and all of these cool things that we use in our day-to-day lives, the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, it's great at that. But if you were able to provide it and that next layer of context around, here's my schema, here's what this means, here's why it means that. That information is invaluable to making a model uh, more useful for any given application. So I love that the defender community, and this is where I think Chaz is spot on. The defender community over the course of the last 20 years has done this. Like we were building towards this by creating these standards so that A, we could speak to one another and understand what each other were talking about. But now, because we have put that effort into that standardization, we can now train models on it.
Yeah.
It's it's a great use case, and that's why we're here talking about AI in the SOC. AI in the SOC is one of the most practical use cases. And to talk about low-hanging fruit, we'll talk basically. I like Chaz, and I'll let you take this because I know you like to talk about this one. This is a knowledge agent, what we at Sumo would call a knowledge agent, right?
Yeah.
And this is providing information to the end user, knowledge, how to do something in an effective way through natural language by training a given model on a knowledge base.
Yeah, so I think without getting our wrist slapped, I'll just say that Sumo Logic has really come up with a very interesting agentic framework strategy, and that will be unveiled over time. But when you have half a dozen purpose-built discrete agents that solve some hard and actually some easy problems, it's going to change the way that you interact with our software, right? So I'm taking this down to Sumo specific, but one of them is very simple use case, a knowledge agent. We have so much documentation out there, and you can imagine we have to integrate with hundreds and hundreds of different solutions. And you have Sumo Logic is in some ways like a gigantic Swiss Army knife where you can do a lot of different things with it. Well, that introduces friction where a user coming into the platform will be banging their head like, I know I can solve this, but how do I do it? And I'm reading documentation and I'm clicking around the UI. All of that goes away if you could overlay a knowledge agent that understands every nuance of our platform, and you could talk to it like that guy that's worked at your company for 30 years that knows more about this thing than that I could forget. And so you're like, hey, I want to create a webhook to interact with ServiceNow and do this, this, and that. Oh, guess what? I know exactly how to do that, and here's how to do it click by click. You've just removed hours of unnecessary friction into using a product and getting an outcome. And how did we do that? Through an agent that simply understood and was trained on all of our documentation and understood the platform, right? Dropping that kind of agent into the platform is a no-brainer. And again, that's not an innovative, like, earth-shattering use of AI, but it's practical and it's useful. And you take that down the line and you imagine like what are all the creative ways that we can embed AI into a complex solution like that, and you start to see the massive amounts of value that we're going to be unlocking.
Well, you take it a step further for a knowledge agent context, right? Remember, one of the things that defines an agent is a defined objective, right? This agent is built to do a specific job, right? Good agents are built to do a specific job. So take Chaz's example of how to do something in Sumo Logic and apply it to potentially a run book that a SOC organization has, right? We have years of institutional knowledge listed out in a run book. I remember when I walked into the SOC that Chaz and I used to work together at, and there was a binder about that thick, and it was the run book. And it was go to this tab for this type of detection and run through these procedures and fill out your case with these fields and provide your answer. That run book, extremely valuable, but very tedious to use, right? In practical application, we now have to provide a binder to everyone, and everyone has to use the old flip the page to get to the right run book. Apply
Am I
that.
flying a 737 or trying to figure out which
Exactly.
rule,
Like, am I doing my checklist here?
yeah,
Can I
yeah.
get this information? So apply a knowledge agent to MITRE defend, right? And this may already be being done somewhere with MITRE's knowledge base, but apply that defend standard operating procedures, for lack of a better term, apply those defend techniques via a knowledge agent based off of the insight that was received to the analyst, right? So now not only am I giving you information and context about the event that occurred, but I'm also giving you information from a specific standard that says we see that this might be this tactic and technique, and here's how this particular knowledge base says you should go and investigate that thing without having the analyst kind of come up with it on their own or just go out to the website and read. So I mean, the practical usage of agents in the security operations space are, I don't want to say limitless, but they're pretty limitless, right?
Yeah, and to that point too, like take that binder analogy. I know we're kind of building this, but that binder was out of date the minute it came off the HP printer, right? And there was new threats and there were new like attack vectors. So now imagine taking a threat informed large language model, or you know threat intelligence is a area that's like if you're not reading it every morning when you wake up, you're behind. And that's like not really healthy for humans. But if you could take that run book and then infuse the threat of the day type intelligence in it, now that's game changing, right? And that's really what we're creating here is, this this, AIs are basically PhD, as Elon Musk says, they're PhD level in almost everything. And now they work for you, and they work 24 hours a day, and you don't have to pay them overtime, and they're at your beck and call, right? So like, let's get that power and get it into the hands of the SOC analysts.
It's like Elon's dream employee, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Um,
some other agents. I mean, we'll talk about the ones that we hear about at those conferences that Chaz mentioned is like you have triage agents, right? Triage agent, in my opinion, should provide a decision on a thing, right? It should say, I've reviewed this information, run it against my reasoning, and determined this to be, benign or malicious or something you need to look into further. So suspicious. That's a triage agent. That's what our medical professionals do is they take and they assess the situation, assess the patient, and we determine whether this patient is in a critical state or can wait for a bit longer before they're seen by, the doctor. So triage is a great use case in the SOC to say,
yeah,
all of the information that I've seen, I want to now then provide a decision on whether this is something you should be concerned with. So
yeah.
that's a great application of agentic AI as well. There's deeper ones and ones that Sumo is excited to talk about in the near future. Um, but those are some practical usage agentic toolings that we could provide to security operations analysts today.
So, Adam, I want to ask a question to both of you. Are we at risk? This is kind of tangential to our conversation here, but as we bring so much intelligence and front load it, are we at risk of kind of dumbing down our workforce where the tier one analysts that kind of like were, battle hardened, like back when I was an analyst, I learned that, we get rid of all of that and we're dropping everyone at tier two and tier three. What does that do to our future workforce that haven't like risen through the ranks because it's all been automated by AI? And this, I don't know the answer. I'm just curious if you guys have thoughts. Is there any risk to that, or is this just the natural progression of just we're using systems more intelligently?
In general, I mean, I think we're seeing studies coming out that, an over reliance on AI for, some kind of baseline cognitive, duties is detrimental to the human brain. And I think you could argue is detrimental more broadly from a societal standpoint if we stop being humans, and start relying on AI too much at a certain level. Like I think it's incredible as a force multiplier for things that you just literally can't throw enough people at. Like looking at all of the, logs that are generated by an enterprise organization, it's just too much. So of course that's a good application for AI. Asking it, how you should reply to an email. Maybe that's good, maybe it's not. Maybe you as a person should, start that and then ask AI to make it better. I think that's where some of the, that rub comes in for me. It's like, let's not stop doing well the things that humans do well. Let's let AI do the things that we can't do or don't do well. And maybe this is more of like a philosophical, let's not lose our humanity, argument that I'm making, but that's how I
Yeah,
personally see it.
interesting.
First off, Adam, I agree with you. I think critical thinking and reasoning skills within the human brain need to be maintained and flexed just like you would any muscle in your body. Um, the over reliance on AI from a text generation and natural language prompt response, multi-turn conversation, I would say has had quite the impact on society writ large, which is not to say that it hasn't been helpful in how polite we are in our email responses, but uh, I would say it has reduced our reliance on our critical thinking to provide a good response. What I will say to answer Chaz's question around are we at risk of losing critical skills and context as it relates to technology in general is absolutely a risk in my opinion. Now, I'll give a very specific example here. and it could date me quite a bit, but that's okay. And I may ruffle some feathers, is that I have seen, I grew up through the ranks of a time period, early 2000s, and I was learning technology, ports protocols, networking, databases, how to rack and stack, how to create cat cables. I mean, I did a lot of things in technology to understand how these things spoke to one another. Now, I didn't go to the microprocessor level or do anything great like some of those engineers have done to bring us that to that point, but I did learn about those things, and that knowledge has then catapulted my career into a trajectory that I can now have meaningful conversations with customers in many different walks of life, and even just water cooler conversations because of that experience. It gives me a foundation of knowledge to say that, oh, I know what you mean now. Where have we considered this thing? Because one time when I was 22, I remember I had to, go and tag all of these subnets. And I had to do that, and I wish I could have done it a better way, or that was so important because those tags then resulted in our ability to inventory our network or something to that effect. So yes, Chaz, I do believe there is a risk that once, and this goes to Adam's point, that for technology's sake, we could be introducing a new era of employee that doesn't necessarily understand how to effectively and investigate a security event because they've always been given the answer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a risk.
I think it's just a dilemma that's part of human progress in general. It's like I don't know, you buy a car, for example, and begrudgingly, that thing is probably so advanced you can't really work on it yourself as much as you used to. But at the same time, you're getting a really advanced car. And so you take it for what it is. And I think for like the AI, the SOC analyst, the ones that we hire tomorrow may not have gone through everything you did, Seth, to get you to where you are, but hopefully we support them and the systems are intelligent enough that you can plug in a diagnostics computer and it'll tell you exactly what's wrong, and you're not just like, oh, I hear that knocking and I know exactly what it is. It's just it's changing the way that we operate for good and for bad. um
Yeah.
I know we're up against time, but one thing that I did want to talk about too is, at the end of the day, there are risks that it's out of scope for our conversation here. Um, but I think the reality is, and this goes to like all of those that might be hindering the adoption of AI in your security operations program, is the risk, I should say, I'll put it this way: the risk of not adopting these new technologies is greater than the risk of adopting.
Yeah.
Hallucinations are real, right? That's not avoidable. Data spillage is real. That could happen. The cost implications of these new technologies, it's real. However, when you take a step back and you look at your business, whether that's as a defender protecting the business assets or just the business itself generating revenue, if you choose not to adopt this new technology, you will be left behind and you will become obsolete. So it's up to us, and this podcast is a great example, is how do we do it responsibly? How do we wrap controls around the new technologies to make sure that it's done in a safe manner? But at the end of the day, the verdict is undisputable. This is a technology that's not going away. You have to learn to deal with it, and that's really what we're here to facilitate, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
take a so what I'm gonna say, it's here to stay. It's a tool, right? They're going to get better. Models are going to get more precise in their objective. Um, but don't let that prevent you from going to your training course that teaches you ports and protocols. Don't prevent that from going and understanding how networks operate. Don't prevent that from taking an ethical hacking course. Don't prevent that from going to an incident response course because it'll only make you better at using this tool,
Yeah.
right? It'll only make you better at using this tool. You should always be a lifelong learner. I hope people take that, especially in this career field, with security being such an important critical piece of our economy, our society. Continue to educate yourselves and educate yourselves on the usage of artificial intelligence to use it efficiently and effectively. But always be a lifelong learner. That's something I'm extremely passionate about, and it will help your conversations be deeper, and you'll be able to connect with folks in a much better way, in my humble opinion. So continue to learn, but it's coming.
That's right. Awesome. Well, thank you both, Seth and Chaz. Thanks for the time today. Really appreciate it. I hope you've all enjoyed this episode. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. And thanks again for watching this episode of Masters of Data. We'll see you on the next one.